That's better. Oh, hello, boars and ghouls. I hope you'll excuse me if I don't get up. I'm a little stiff today. Then again, I'm a little stiff every day. Actually, I twisted my neck playing croquet. But it wasn't hurting the way I thought it should, so I called my chiropractor. Of course, some people look elsewhere for their pain, like the old man in tonight's Terror Tale. His idea of an antibiotic was to marry a younger woman. I call this plasma play Strung Along.
Hey, Clyde, what's the matter? I thought I left my dog here, Cuckoo. You left your dog here? But Clyde, can't you read? This is a no barking zone. Oh, no. Oh, yeah, kiddo. I'll bet the cops collared him. Well, we better get to the pound.
Hope you had a good time, kids. And remember, wherever you may go, whatever you may seek, we'll all get together same time next week. Oh, ho, ho. Hey, hey. Oh.
Can't get him out of the house.
Radio City Music Hall presents Joseph Renfield and Coco the Clown.
Okay, let's give a big hand for Coco the Clown and Cowboy Clyde. Let's bring them out. And here they are, ladies and gentlemen, Coco and Clyde.
Want my opinion?
Not especially.
How about taking a little more off the top?
Nobody asked you, Coco.
You've been carving that same head now for 2 months. You'll make those cheekbones any higher.
No, damn it. Don't say it. The last thing I want to hear from you is I told you so.
Coco been bothering you again?
Coco bothering me? You kidding?
I bought you your mail. Why don't you come for a swim?
I want to take you away from your friend.
Lucy went home. For Christ,
She's magnificent, isn't she, Coco?
She's a real piece of work, all right.
What is it?
You won't believe it. This is incredible. They want me for a tribute to the golden age of television.
What?
Yes, for a television special. They want me to do one of the old Coco and Clyde routines.
Now, wait a minute. Do you think you're up for this? I mean, they're not giving you much notice.
Up to it? Why, I could do it in my sleep. Ellie, this is what I need. I'm going out of my head. I mean, who knows? This could be the beginning of a comeback.
Well, now, let's not blow it out of proportion. It's just a TV show. But who knows? Maybe it'll get you out of the house.
Oh, yeah, there's so much to do. There's a ton of people to call. You know, I've been thinking, maybe instead of doing one of the old routines, I do something new.
Now, wait a minute. I don't want you pushing yourself. I won't let you do this if it makes you sick again.
Sick? But I told you already. I haven't felt this good in years.
Well, maybe we should have Dr. Lippman check you out just in case.
Why? I'm on enough medication already.
All right, no more doctors. Could we at least get someone to help you, though? Would you do that for me?
I don't know anybody anymore. Well, maybe I'll call the trades tomorrow and place a classified.
Classifieds, huh? You never know who you're going to get from those. Why don't I talk to my acting teacher? He knows so many people. I'm sure he knows someone who could help you.
Uh-huh.
What's that all about?
I don't know. I guess I feel inspired.
Inspired, eh? And this is Joseph's workshop.
I can't tell you how excited I am. I grew up on this stuff as a kid.
Didn't we all?
Oh, wow.
Joseph, David's here. Oh, that's funny. He knew you were coming. Why don't you wait down here and I'll go see if I can find him.
Okay, thanks.
Don't touch him. You don't know where he's been.
Who is that?
Who do you want it to be?
How the hell did you do that?
That's for me to know and you to find out. Hey, Joseph, come on out. There's a guy out here spying on us.
Now, Coco, you should try being a little nicer to the young man. You don't want to scare him away, do you?
I don't frighten that easy, Mr. Renfield.
For starters, it's not Mr. Renfield. It's Joseph, okay?
Yes, sir. This is a real honor for me.
Did Ellen tell you kissing my ass was part of the job?
No, sir. Actually, that was my idea.
So, how do you know Ellen?
Well, she takes acting class from a friend of mine.
And do you know each other very well?
Actually, we've never met. I had to stop taking the class a little while ago.
Oh. Well, in that case, let's get to the good stuff. Have you worked with marionettes before?
Not really. But I have done some work in animatronics, though. Mechanical puppets. Using remote controls and computer circuits, that sort of thing. Actually, I've got some great pictures here I'd love to show you.
No. Puppets aren't machines. They're an extension of the puppeteer. They're a part of you, and you become part of them. Now, if that's a problem for you, maybe you shouldn't do it.
Mr. Renfield, Joseph, I want to learn. That's why I'm here. And now I've got the chance to learn the craft from a master. I want that chance, I do.
told you I would. Yes, I know. We'll talk about it later. Rick, I said we'll talk about it later. I have to go.
Who was that?
A friend from class. So, how's what's-his-name working out?
David. I think you'll be fine.
Great.
What?
I don't know, he just seemed too eager.
You don't like him? I thought usually...
No, he's fine. Comes highly recommended. He just struck me as being too pushy. But if he's the right man to help you get your show together, he's okay by me. I'm glad to see you so pleased. I left some dinner in the microwave for you.
Where are you going?
Where I go every Tuesday night, my acting class.
Do you have to go? Why can't we have dinner at home?
Well, it's the only chance I get to get out of the house. You may like being shut in, but I don't.
Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Depends, Coco. What are you thinking? She wouldn't do that to us. Not after things have finally started happening again. She wouldn't. Tell me you agree with me. Clyde, I lost you in that last wave. I lost me in that last wave, too. Oh, and by the way, Clyde.
Damn it, I keep getting the strings tangled.
Well, now, it's okay, it's okay. Don't get frustrated. You're using too much wrist. Now, just think of the arms and hands as a long appendage reaching down through the controller into the puppet's toes. Eh? Just back and forth real easy. Like this, see? Just don't force it.
It's amazing how you do that.
Thanks, kiddo. I've been in this business a long time. It should be amazing. Oh, I'm sorry. Here, you try it.
Okay.
Oh, there you are, Clyde. I lost you in that last wave. I lost me in that last wave, too. Oh, and by the way, Clyde, when you get up on the board, you're supposed to yell cowabunga, not help me, Mommy. Oh, thanks, Coco. And what do I yell when the board gets on top of me? That's when you yell, help me, Mommy. Oh, that's much better. Much better. Come on. Oh, hello, darling. Wasn't David great?
It's lunchtime.
Took him 2 weeks to learn what took me 2 years. Did you catch the scene?
Yeah, it looked okay.
From her, that's a rave review. What'd you think of the new lines?
They're okay.
Well, I thought they were great. David wrote them.
Who told David to do that?
Well, he came up with the idea, and I liked it.
Joe, you've been winning Emmy Awards for writing since before he was born. We hired him to help you with the show, not change the act.
All I did was update the material from the 50s to the 90s.
Great. But the show you're writing for is a tribute to the 50s. I suggest you change it back.
No, but I like the changes. They work better. Hey, listen, David's got a great idea.
So who's running the show now, you or him?
You okay, Joe?
I'm fine.
Want me to go get her?
No. I'll be okay. I just got to catch my breath.
What's going on, Joe?
Nothing.
Come on, this is me. David, you can talk to me. Is there some kind of problem between you and Ellen? Do you want to talk about it?
I think there's someone in her acting class.
What do you mean? You think she's having an affair?
No, I'm being ridiculous. Let's get back to work.
Look, if you want, I can swing by your acting class on Wednesday night and I can check it out for you. It'd be no problem.
Wednesday night? Her acting class is on Tuesday night.
No. It used to be Tuesday night, but they changed it like a year ago. That's why I had to drop out.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Joe. Really.
That's okay. It's okay. I'm all right.
I don't think you should come back tomorrow.
What have you got against me? I don't understand why you hate me so much.
I'd like to do this as quietly as possible. But if it's a matter of money, I'm sure we can come to some agreement.
Is that what you think this is all about? You are disgusting. Do you know that? By the way, how long have you been cheating on your husband?
How dare you? How fucking dare you talk to me
Stop
like
it,
that?
you two. Will you please stop it?
Did you hear what he said to me? Are you gonna let him get away with that? I want you to fire him.
I can't do the show without him. I need him.
You need me, and I don't want him in my house.
Joe, it's okay. It's not worth upsetting you. The show is the most important thing. We'll be in touch. I promise.
David, don't go, please. What's the matter with you? David is my friend.
Oh, he's your friend, is he? You can have friends, but I can't.
I never said you can't have friends.
That's news. In the past 8 years, I've lost every friend I've had because of you. I'm sick of your jealousy. I'm sick of you trying to control me like I'm one of your goddamn puppets.
Where are you going?
To see a friend.
I never did trust that dame. Take my advice. All I'm saying is, maybe you should just check into it. Do it!
I should have listened to you, Coco. You knew. You knew.
It wasn't exactly hard to see coming. She's young and beautiful. You're just a tired old man.
What am I going to do?
You mean if you were you? Or if you were me?
I'll divorce her. Call my lawyer in the morning. I never want to see her again.
Divorce will cost you. I say you take matters into your own hands.
No, I can't. I can't.
Sure you can.
No. 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 Coco? Coco?
Ellen. Sorry, old man. Real sorry.
Is he dead yet?
Almost.
Joseph, this is Rick. He's a puppeteer just like you. Aren't you, baby?
Mm-hmm. So what do you think, Joe? I know it's not as graceful as what you do, but I think with a little money.
Your money. I think you'll end up pretty damn good.
Bye, Joe. You should get cleaned up. Call 911.
Where'd you put the real Coco anyway?
He's under there. Come on, hon, we don't have that much time.
Okay. Rick? Rick, what the hell are you doing? The paramedics are gonna be here any minute. Rick, what are you doing? You have to get out of here. This isn't funny.
Up here, kiddo.
You're not gonna believe this.
Yeah, I've seen just about everything.
Not like this, you haven't.
Well, Coco may have been the puppet, but in the end, Joseph was the one who paid for Marionette. As for me, kiddies, it seems my pain in the neck was more serious than I thought. But I'm almost finished with my scarapy. One more adjustment, and I'll be out of here. Anytime you're ready, Bones. Now that's what I call pain in full. This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. And this is your brain after watching Tales from the Crypt. Evening, creep. We interrupt your regularly scheduled television program to bring you a bit of culture. That's right, kiddies. Tonight, instead of rotting your grave matter, I'm going to improve it with a tasteful tale about someone who just can't fright the feeling. I call it Werewolf Concerto.
Deepest regrets, Mrs. Bailey. If it's at any comfort at all, the coroner tells me that your husband's death was instant. Oh, my. Please help her to the settee. Thank you.
Mr. Antoine? Mr. Antoine! 3 people have been murdered at your hotel. I would like to know what you are doing about it, what the authorities are doing about it.
I am leaving. This is bullshit. Send the kid for my bags.
I'm afraid last night's storm has made that impossible. A mudslide is completely blocking the highway.
Wait a minute. That means the police can't get in. There's a killer stalking this place. Killer? Is that what you think? What's the matter with you people? Why can't you admit it? It's a wolf. A werewolf.
All right, now, people, please listen to me. Now, I agree that every bit of evidence leads to only one conclusion. A werewolf. But your panic is premature. Someone has already agreed to kill the beast. It has come to my attention that there is an individual among us who, in certain circles, is considered an expert in dealing with this type of phenomena. Upon approach, this individual was kind enough to offer their services, and in exchange, ask only that I keep their anonymity in place.
What kind of fools do you take us for, Antoine? You expect me to believe that one of us is a werewolf exterminator? What? Are you people actually buying this crap?
Werewolves are real, Mr. Hertz. To the hunter, they are the ultimate prize.
You people are all nuts. I'll wash my hands of the whole thing.
Good. Then it's settled. We'll all stay inside, and soon things will return to normal. Now, I have planned a marvelous weekend. Food, drink, entertainment. Pietra?
Yes, sir.
Drinks for everyone.
Right away, sir.
I love that color on you. It's going to be a festival, I promise. It's so exciting.
Well done, Mr. Antoine.
You know what they say about a man who does that to his ice, don't you?
Yeah. You can always count on him to lick the competition.
Something like that.
You been listening to this?
Hard not to.
What do you think?
About
werewolves.
that whole hair on the back thing's always been a big turnoff for me. And you?
Oh, I dig a chick with a healthy fro. Wherever I can find it.
Later days, barber boy.
The Bowl, August 91.
Hollywood's a depressing town. I try not to keep track.
Janice Baird performs Mussorgsky's Pictures at an exhibition in G major.
Kind of old for a groupie, aren't we?
The sun's coming up. Why don't we discuss it over breakfast?
I don't do breakfast.
Me neither. It's amazing how much we've got in common. Lunch?
Nope.
Dinner?
Nada.
20 questions naked in the bathtub? Say around midnight?
Who's back to the faucet?
Mine, of course.
You just won yourself a prize, groupie. Room 212, around midnight. And don't forget your submarine.
It's gonna be a pleasure watching you perform, Janice Baird. A real pleasure. Peter,
Yes, sir.
do me a favor, kid. I want to know if anyone at this hotel receives any kind of communication. Don't care whether it's a fax, phone call, letter, or even a wrong number. I want to know about it. Okay? Thanks, kid.
All right, then.
Mr. Antoine.
Mr. Lokai. Sleep safely.
Mr. Lokai,
Good afternoon, sir.
Mr. Lokai?
please join us.
Yes, take a seat. We missed you at breakfast this morning.
Yes, I went for a jog. You know, there's something about the mountain air that just seems to bring out the best in people. That's a lovely dress.
Oh, thank you. You're very kind.
Have either of you seen Mr. Hertz today?
Mr. Hertz? What a curious question. Why do you ask?
He's a curious man. He seemed rather uptight last night.
Weren't we all?
Good afternoon, Mr. Lokai.
Hello, Wolfgang. Now, what's for lunch?
We have a wonderful salmon en croûte with the dill sauce, and we have a quail on baby greens, and I made a special frittata for you with baby vegetables and a hint of fennel. It's delicious.
You, got a cheeseburger?
Cheeseburger?
And, a large iced tea. Wolfgang.
Yes, sir.
Plenty of ice. Very hot.
So, Mr. Lokai, who do you think the mysterious werewolf hunter could be?
It seems to me that that is the wrong question. And one, might I add, that would only be important to a particular person.
And who might that be?
The werewolf himself? Or herself? Is there anything you wish to confess, Mercedes?
I think Mr. Lokai is wise to you, my dear. I think it best you give yourself up.
Oh, you do think you're so funny. I'm serious. Aren't you even just the least bit curious?
Curious? In a situation like this, curiosity only gets you one place, and that's dead. Ask Mr. Bailey.
Oh, God, poor Mr. Bailey. He was such a nice man.
He was.
We were just starting to become friendly.
That's a very revealing photo.
Really? How so?
Well, you know, I think he's right, my dear. The full moon does favor you. At least more so than our friend the werewolf. Doing a bit of sleuthing yourself, Mr. Lokai?
Just got an eye for detail. Isn't that right, Carl?
Excuse me?
Please, sit down, join us. You seem to be quite the expert on werewolves. Have you changed professions since we last met?
That mask of yours is going to get you in trouble someday, Mr. Lokai. People don't like it.
Do I detect a threat in that mouthful of cliches, reject?
I would like to know what you're doing here.
A relaxing, Carl. On your money. He hates losing, but he's so damned good at it.
Do not interfere with me again. Is that clear?
That's okay, Carl. We'll talk later, just you and me. Alone.
Goodbye, Mr. Lokai.
He's very sensitive. So... Janice? You there? Hello? Janice? I hope you don't mind, but your door was open. I thought perhaps if you, weren't doing anything, we could get your bathtub warmed up. Hello? Janice?
I warned you not to follow me, Mr. Lips. If you don't look away, I'm going to shoot you.
Bingo.
Heard you asking for me at lunch.
No, not me. I was looking for a big, sweaty, dumb fuck with a bald head.
Oh, very funny, Smartass. You just keep yucking it up.
Nice bag. Goes with the vest. Now, where's Reject? We wouldn't want him to miss the party.
Reject won't be coming.
No, I suppose he won't. High price to pay. I knew the little ape had something on someone.
Yeah, he had a secret, all right. He kept his nose a little too far up the wrong ass and started sniffing around. Kind of like you.
Really? That's funny. I've always considered myself to be more of a leg man.
You play games with me. Reject. He liked games. Only thing is, he lost.
Well, that's the difference between Carl and me. You see, I never lose.
You're too goddamn smug. Too bad I have to shoot you, because I'd rather tear you limb from limb, you hear me?
I heard you. Bet this werewolf business can be kind of expensive, Mr. Hertz.
You guys, you're all the same. No challenge.
What are we gonna do? The sun is going down.
Exactly.
Mr. Antoine, we want some answers and we want them now. You said that something would be done.
That's right.
And where's the werewolf? Where's your so-called great hunter?
Where is he?
Well, here comes Mr. Lokai. Let's ask him.
Yeah, ask him.
Good evening, everyone.
Why didn't you ask me?
Did you ask him?
Well, people, please don't be alarmed. We're all in good hands. I've been assured that it's only a matter of time before this beast is destroyed.
Mr. Lokai. This fax just came in from Mr. Reject. The authorities sent down 2 agents to the hotel, just like he said they would. Mr. Reject's going to collect reward money.
Reward for what?
For the information they sent him on Hertz.
What information? What information?
Mr. Reject has proof that Hertz is a Nazi.
What are you talking about?
Mr. Hertz is a Nazi war criminal. Mr. Reject has pictures. I saw them.
No. How could I have been so stupid? It's not Hertz.
I want to take this opportunity to invite you all to a special engagement that we have the privilege of presenting
There's
here
still time.
Mr. Lokai, are you all right?
Janice Baird, world-renowned pianist,
Janice?
agreed to honor us with an impromptu concert this evening in the hotel lounge.
Peter.
At 9:30.
Yes.
You're
What time
all
did Miss Baird get back to the hotel?
I don't know.
Even you, Mr.
I don't think she left. And
Of course she left. I was in a room this morning. She wasn't there.
Mr. Lokai, nobody sees Miss Baird in the morning. I mean, she doesn't crawl out of bed till late in the afternoon. We think she has a drinking problem.
It couldn't be. It couldn't be.
Come on now, bitch. It's time to hula. You didn't really think you'd get away from me, did you?
Didn't expect you till midnight, groupie. Lucky for me, I'm an early riser. You loopies are so easy. You stomp around, sticking your chest out like you haven't got a brain in your head. Maybe it's better that way.
Piano.
Oh, yes. The piano. Think of it as my tour bus, baby. You know, I kind of like you. I think I will take you up on breakfast after all.
Poor Loci. Thought he was starring in La Boheme. Turned out he was second lead in Romeo and Juliet. I hope you're not cultured out, kiddies, because the next part of our program is a little potted eye I've been working on. I hope you like the choreography. Whenever you're ready, Isadora. I guess it's back to the corpse du ballet for her.
The night was thick with a damp, suffocating fog that clung to the streets like a shroud, curling around the lampposts and the slick asphalt with an almost sentient patience. The city had long since fallen asleep, but the rhythm of its underbelly throbbed with a pulse of its own, the subtle scraping of a metal cart, the distant clang of a shuttered diner, the whisper of footsteps that weren't supposed to be there. In a narrow alley, between brick walls streaked with grime and graffiti, a shadow moved with deliberate caution. It paused, listening, smelling the air, the faint tang of iron and something sweeter, something like the scent of fear itself. This was Calvin, a man whose life had become a careful choreography of evasion and deceit. He wasn't just any man. He was a man walking the razor's edge between desire and destruction, the kind of man whose heartbeat could betray him in the wrong moment, the kind of man who understood the precariousness of fortune and the ease with which it could crumble. Calvin had learned long ago that charm was a weapon as deadly as a knife. In the glossy confines of his apartment earlier that evening, he had rehearsed every smile, every pause, every touch of the hand as if it were a part of a sacred liturgy. He had slipped into a tailored suit, its dark fabric swallowing him like a shadow, and adjusted his tie before catching a glance at the mirror. There he was, a man who looked as though he had everything under control, the kind of man who could convince anyone of anything, and yet beneath that smooth exterior, the tension in his jaw betrayed an unease he refused to admit to himself. He had a plan, and as any careful predator knows, a plan is a fragile thing, easily shattered by a single misstep. The plan involved Marcy, a woman whose beauty was the kind of perilous thing that made rational men forget themselves. Her hair fell in golden waves that caught the light like molten metal, and her eyes were wide, inquisitive, almost innocent, though Calvin knew better. She had secrets, small and fragile, wrapped tightly around her heart. Calvin had discovered one such secret, a detail so subtle and private that it made him giddy with possibility. It was enough to entangle her in his web, yet just the right amount to avoid raising suspicion too early. He had been patient, watching, waiting, like a spider weaving the intricate threads of its trap. Every compliment, every chance meeting, every inadvertent brush of hands was calculated, measured, meticulously designed to draw her closer, to string her along without ever revealing the trap that awaited. And yet, as he moved through the dimly lit streets, Calvin felt an unfamiliar tug in his chest, a flicker of apprehension that was almost imperceptible. It was as if the night itself had sensed the fragility of his scheme and whispered a caution, a warning he would have been wise to heed. His instincts, honed by years of manipulation and small conquests, told him that this was not the simple game he had played before. There was a tension in the air, a vibration that ran through the soles of his shoes, up his spine, and settled in the pit of his stomach. Calvin did not often feel fear, but he felt it now, quiet and insistent, like the prelude to a storm. He reached the restaurant where Marcy worked, a small bistro whose facade glowed warmly against the chill of the night. The scent of fresh bread and roasted coffee spilled out into the street, mingling with the damp fog in a strangely comforting embrace. Through the window, he could see her laughing with a customer, her head thrown back in a carefree moment that made his chest tighten. He watched her, noting the curve of her neck, the way her eyes sparkled when she smiled, and the subtle nervous gesture of her fingers twisting a ring that wasn't there yesterday. Every movement, every flicker of emotion was data, fuel for the careful manipulation he had spent months perfecting. Calvin entered without knocking, allowing the door to swing closed behind him with a soft chime that barely registered in the murmur of conversation. The room smelled of warm pastries, brewed coffee, and the faint undertone of vanilla from the scented candles on the tables. Marcy turned at the sound of his footsteps, her expression shifting from surprise to a cautious warmth. "Calvin," she said, her voice like silk brushing against the edge of a knife. "I didn't expect to see you tonight." "I thought I'd drop by," he replied, his tone casual, effortless. "Thought you could use a friendly face." The words were simple, but every syllable was carefully weighed, designed to lull her into comfort, to erase suspicion. He offered a smile, one that was practiced and charming, yet somehow contained a trace of something more, a shadow of urgency that only a keen observer might notice. She smiled back, a hesitant curve of her lips, and for a moment, Calvin felt a flicker of triumph. The first thread had been woven. The initial tension had eased. They talked about trivialities, weather, the new display at the local gallery, a recipe she had recently perfected, but every word was a step along a path he had meticulously laid out. He listened, offering insights and observations, planting subtle seeds of admiration and curiosity. Marcy responded naturally, unaware of the invisible strings that now connected her to him. After what seemed like an eternity wrapped in the ordinary, Calvin excused himself, claiming an errand across town. As he walked back into the fog-laden streets, he felt a thrill of satisfaction that mingled uneasily with the persistent anxiety gnawing at the edges of his mind. The city had a way of swallowing the unwary whole, and Calvin knew he was threading a delicate needle. Every encounter, every smile, every touch could be the one that unraveled his carefully orchestrated design. He paused at the corner of an alley, listening. Footsteps echoed from the darkness, not his own, not anyone he recognized. There was a soft scuffing, a whisper of movement that didn't belong, a hint of danger that pricked at the edges of his awareness. For the first time in a long time, Calvin felt truly observed, truly vulnerable. The thrill of the game, which had always been intoxicating, now carried a bitter edge of fear. He adjusted his coat, his fingers brushing against the cool metal of the lighter in his pocket, a small comfort, a talisman against uncertainty. Marcy's laughter, still faint and carried on the wind from the bistro behind him, reminded him of the stakes. She was the prize, the delicate object of desire, and the game required patience and precision. But now, with the unseen eyes in the alley and the growing tension coiling in his chest, Calvin realized that the rules were changing. The web he had woven was no longer entirely his to control. The threads were taut, vibrating with a tension he could not ignore, and for the first time, he wondered whether he had underestimated the forces arrayed against him. A cat darted across the alley, a black blur that hissed at his presence, and Calvin let out a quiet breath. The night seemed to exhale with him, a subtle warning that the city itself was aware of his intrusion. He moved forward cautiously, aware of every sound, every shadow, every flicker of movement in the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, slicing through the fog, a reminder that even in a world of careful manipulation, chaos lurked just beyond the edge of perception. By the time Calvin reached the apartment he rented above a closed storefront, he was tense, alert, and acutely aware of every noise. The lock clicked behind him, sealing him off from the night, but not from the unease that had settled in his mind. He stripped off his coat, hung it carefully, and lit a cigarette, the flame-throwing shadows that danced across the walls. In the flickering light, he saw himself as he really was, a man perched on the edge of obsession, driven by desire, yet increasingly aware that every carefully laid plan carried within it the seeds of its own destruction. He smoked slowly, thinking of Marcy, of the subtle ways he had drawn her closer, and of the threads that now connected them. The game was far from over, and Calvin knew that each subsequent move would require more cunning, more patience, and a deeper understanding of the unseen forces at play. The city outside was indifferent, relentless, and unyielding, and within its fog-shrouded streets, danger waited patiently, a predator circling, watching, ready to strike. Calvin extinguished the cigarette, feeling the weight of the night pressing down on him. His reflection in the window was fragmented, distorted by the glass and the shadows of the room. He reached out, almost touching it, and felt a shiver run through him. The game was only beginning, and he was acutely aware that in the world he had entered, desire and danger were inextricably intertwined. The threads were taut, the web was complete, and the night was alive with possibilities both thrilling and terrifying. Somewhere in the distance, a clock struck midnight. The city seemed to pause for a heartbeat, as if listening. And in that moment, Calvin realized that the strings he had so carefully woven might soon pull him into a place he had not anticipated, a place where control was an illusion, and every choice carried consequences beyond imagining. The fog pressed against the window, and Calvin leaned against it, watching the distorted reflections of the streetlights flicker and dance. The game was alive. The night was alive. And somewhere, unseen, the first moves of a dangerous, intricate, and ultimately deadly sequence were already in motion. The morning came with a grey, diffused light that seeped reluctantly through the slats of Calvin's blinds, casting thin stripes across the floor like prison bars. The city was waking slowly, the distant hum of traffic and the clatter of garbage trucks signaling the start of another day, yet Calvin felt none of the energy that dawn often brought. He sat at the small kitchen table, nursing a cup of bitter coffee, his eyes tracing the patterns of shadows and light as if they held some secret message. The previous night's tension had not faded, instead, it lingered, a persistent itch at the back of his mind, a silent drumbeat warning him that the threads he had set in motion were already moving toward an unpredictable end. Marcy's image haunted him as he sipped the coffee. The curl of her hair, the warmth of her laughter, the subtle glimmer of curiosity in her eyes, it all seemed impossibly fragile, like crystal poised on the edge of a table. He was enthralled, as always, by the delicate balance between what she revealed and what remained hidden, the small clues that hinted at desires and fears she did not voice. Calvin knew that to manipulate, to guide, to entangle, he had to study not only the surface but also the undercurrents, the hidden streams of thought and emotion that most people never acknowledged even to themselves. By mid-morning, he was out again, moving through the streets with the practiced grace of a man who had long ago learned how to blend into the flow of the city. Every step was calculated, every glance, every pause, a subtle interaction with the world around him. He walked past closed storefronts, the faded paint peeling like dead skin, past the occasional figure scurrying with the business of the day, and past the alleys that still clung to the night's secrets. Yet beneath this ordinary exterior, Calvin was acutely aware of every detail, every potential obstacle, every variable that could disrupt his carefully laid plan. He approached the bistro where Marcy worked, the same place he had visited the previous night, and paused for a moment, watching her from across the street. She was moving with her usual rhythm, attending to customers with a grace that seemed effortless, yet he noted the subtle flicker of tension in her posture whenever a male patron lingered too long, or when the kitchen grew particularly busy. These small observations were fuel for his strategy, each detail was a thread, each reaction a lever he could manipulate to advance his goal. Inside, Marcy noticed him immediately, her smile greeting him without hesitation, though her eyes carried a hint of cautious curiosity. "Back again so soon?" she asked, her tone light, casual, but with an edge of awareness that made Calvin's pulse quicken. It was the first sign of resistance, however subtle, and he recognized it immediately. The game was a delicate dance, and he had to adjust his steps to maintain the rhythm without revealing the intentions beneath his smile. "I thought I'd check in," he replied smoothly, his voice carrying a warmth that belied the urgency coiled in his chest. "See how things are going." His eyes lingered for a moment longer than necessary, noting the slight wrinkle of concentration between her brows, the curve of her lips as she forced a casual laugh. It was in these small, seemingly insignificant gestures that the true landscape of desire and vulnerability revealed itself, and Calvin was a careful cartographer, mapping every contour with precision. The morning passed in a series of subtle maneuvers, conversations carefully engineered to elicit information and influence decisions without ever appearing manipulative. Calvin asked questions about the menu, the new delivery schedules, the gallery show she planned to attend later that week, all the while observing the micro-expressions, the shifts in tone, the fleeting glances that betrayed her thoughts. Marcy responded naturally, oblivious to the intricate web being woven around her, a web that would gradually constrict without ever making a sound. By noon, Calvin excused himself under the pretense of running an errand. As he stepped out into the overcast streets, he felt a subtle unease, a tension that had been growing steadily since the previous night. Something in the rhythm of the city had shifted, a faint irregularity in the flow of pedestrian traffic, the sudden absence of a familiar sound. He paused, listening to the city breathe, trying to pinpoint the source of the discomfort, but it remained elusive, a shadow at the edge of perception. He wandered through a quieter part of town, where the buildings were older, their facades crumbling, windows boarded or cracked. The alleyways here were narrower, darker, filled with the scent of damp brick and decay. Calvin's senses, honed by years of careful observation, were on high alert. Every rustle, every distant footstep, every subtle flicker of movement was catalogued and analyzed. He moved with the fluidity of a predator, aware that the city itself could be an accomplice to his schemes, or an adversary. As he passed an abandoned warehouse, the faint sound of movement caught his attention. It was a subtle scraping, almost imperceptible over the ambient noise, but Calvin's trained ears recognized it immediately. He approached cautiously, his hand brushing against the cool metal of a pipe along the wall, ready to use it if necessary. Inside, he found nothing but the detritus of a forgotten era, rusted machinery, broken crates, the lingering scent of old oil. Yet the feeling of being watched remained, a prickle of awareness that ran down his spine. Returning to the bistro in the afternoon, Calvin found Marcy seated at a small table by the window, a notebook open before her. She was sketching something, her brow furrowed in concentration, her lips slightly parted. There was an intensity in her focus, a vulnerability that Calvin could sense even from a distance. He approached, sliding into the chair opposite her, and observed silently for a moment before speaking. "What are you working on?" he asked casually, leaning forward just enough to suggest interest without intruding. Marcy looked up, startled for a fraction of a second, then smiled. "Just some ideas for a new design," she replied, closing the notebook with a soft snap. "Nothing important." There was a defensiveness in her tone, a small wall she was erecting without realizing it, and Calvin recognized it immediately. It was a subtle signal, a sign that the web was tightening, that her curiosity and suspicion were beginning to intertwine. He nodded, allowing a slow, measured smile to play across his face. "Everything you do is important," he said. "Even small ideas can become something extraordinary with the right attention." His words were simple, but they carried an undercurrent of suggestion, a gentle push toward dependency, toward the emotional attachment he sought. Marcy's eyes lingered on his for a heartbeat longer than necessary, betraying a flicker of interest, of something unspoken, and Calvin felt a small thrill. The first stage of influence was always the most delicate, and he had navigated it perfectly so far. The hours passed with the subtle interchange of glances, comments, and shared laughter, each interaction a brick in the invisible architecture he was constructing around her. Calvin's mind was a meticulous machine, analyzing probabilities, predicting reactions, adjusting his approach with each minor shift in behavior. He could sense the tension in her shoulders easing, the cautious warmth in her responses growing. Yet beneath this apparent progress, he remained vigilant. The night had taught him that the smallest oversight could unravel everything. Evening approached with a muted sky, the city bathed in the soft glow of street lights. Calvin walked Marcy home, their conversation light, bordering on flirtatious, yet tinged with an undercurrent of subtle probing. He guided her along side streets, avoiding the main thoroughfares, creating a sense of intimacy and shared secrecy. Each step was deliberate, designed to heighten trust, to make her feel enclosed in a world where only he existed as a reliable presence. As they reached her apartment building, Marcy paused, glancing up at the illuminated windows above. "Thank you for walking me home," she said softly, a hint of genuine appreciation in her tone. Calvin's smile deepened, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. The day had been a success, the threads of influence woven ever tighter. Yet as he turned to leave, a shadow detached itself from the doorway across the street, a figure standing silently, watching. Calvin felt the familiar prickle of unease, the whisper of danger threading through the excitement of victory. He departed with a casual wave, masking the flicker of awareness in his eyes. The city was alive with potential threats, and while he had mastered the game of manipulation with Marcy, the broader stage remained unpredictable. Somewhere, in the distance, unseen hands were moving pieces he could not yet perceive. The thrill of the hunt, the intoxicating mix of control and risk, was now accompanied by a subtle, persistent tension. Returning to his apartment, Calvin closed the door behind him and exhaled slowly. He lit another cigarette, the flame illuminating the lines of concentration etched into his face. He thought of Marcy, of the delicate balance of trust and attraction he had begun to cultivate, and of the unseen forces that might soon interfere. The game was far from over, and he knew instinctively that the next moves would require greater precision, greater patience, and a sharper understanding of the precarious dance between desire and danger. The night stretched before him, heavy and expectant, filled with the promise of opportunity and the whisper of peril. Calvin was acutely aware that while he had won small victories today, the larger game, the one that would determine the ultimate outcome, was just beginning. And in the shadows beyond the glow of his window, the city waited, watching, patient, and infinitely dangerous. The city had a different personality at night, one that Calvin had come to know intimately, a personality that whispered secrets in the language of shadows and reflected desires in the subtle movements of its inhabitants. Tonight, it seemed restless, the fog heavier, clinging to the buildings and streetlights, creating a muted, almost surreal atmosphere that made every movement feel amplified. Calvin moved through it with purpose, each step measured, each breath taken as a deliberate act of observation. The rhythm of the streets had its own pulse, a beat that he could sense even in the silence, and he adjusted his pace to match it, blending with the nocturnal life around him. Marcy had agreed, almost casually, to meet him at a small cafe on the edge of town. The arrangement had been her idea, though Calvin suspected the seeds of suggestion had been sown long before, planted subtly in conversations that seemed innocent but carried hidden intention. As he approached the cafe, he noted the way the light spilled from its windows, warm and inviting against the chill of the night, a beacon in the grey haze. Inside, Marcy sat alone at a table near the back, her notebook open, the faint scratch of her pen occasionally breaking the quiet hum of conversation. She looked up as he entered, her eyes lighting with recognition and something more, anticipation, curiosity, perhaps the faintest hint of excitement. "Good evening," Calvin said smoothly, sliding into the chair opposite her. His voice was calm, controlled, but beneath it, a subtle vibration of tension lingered. "I hope I didn't keep you waiting." "Not at all," Marcy replied, closing her notebook. There was a lightness in her tone, a trace of amusement that suggested she had been enjoying herself. Yet Calvin noticed the subtle tension in her hands, the way her fingers curled around the edge of the table, betraying a slight nervousness. It was these small details, almost imperceptible, that he lived for, the hidden truths beneath the surface, the unspoken reactions that revealed far more than words ever could. They spoke of trivial things at first, the weather, the new art exhibition in town, the book Marcy had been reading, but as the conversation progressed, Calvin carefully steered it toward topics that would reveal more about her fears, her desires, and her vulnerabilities. Each question was a carefully placed probe, each response a thread he could weave into his growing web. He listened intently, offering subtle affirmations, occasional glimpses of shared understanding, always careful not to reveal the full extent of his intentions. Marcy laughed at one of his anecdotes, a delicate, ringing sound that made Calvin's chest tighten with a mix of triumph and anticipation. It was a small victory, the kind that made the careful work of manipulation feel effortless and rewarding. Yet beneath the pleasure, he remained acutely aware of the stakes. Every smile, every laugh, every moment of apparent intimacy was a fragile construct, one misstep away from collapse. He had learned through years of practice that control was always an illusion, that the most carefully laid plans could unravel in an instant. After a time, Calvin suggested a walk, a casual stroll along the quieter streets that ran parallel to the city's main thoroughfares. The fog had thickened, muffling sound and softening edges, creating a sense of intimacy and isolation. Marcy agreed, falling into step beside him, her body language relaxed yet subtly alert. Calvin's senses were fully engaged. He noticed the way she shifted her weight, the slight hesitation in her movements, the fleeting glances she cast toward the buildings around them. Every detail was data, every nuance a tool he could use to further his objective. As they walked, Calvin allowed himself a moment of reflection. The thrill of the game, the intoxicating mix of desire, control, and danger, was always accompanied by an undercurrent of anxiety. He knew that one miscalculation, one exposure of his true intent, could destroy the carefully constructed narrative he had woven. Yet the risk was part of the allure, part of the reason he continued to pursue it with such meticulous care. Marcy was unaware of the invisible strings that now connected them, and Calvin intended to keep it that way for as long as necessary. Their conversation gradually shifted to more personal topics. Marcy spoke of her childhood, the small triumphs and disappointments that had shaped her, the moments of vulnerability she rarely shared with anyone. Calvin listened, offering gentle encouragement, validating her experiences with a warmth that was carefully calibrated to deepen her trust. Each disclosure was a brick in the invisible architecture he was constructing around her, each shared memory a step closer to the emotional entanglement he sought. As they passed a deserted park, the shadows of bare trees stretching long and spindly across the fog-shrouded ground, Calvin felt a sudden prickle of awareness. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable, the sense that they were being observed, that some presence beyond the immediate scene had taken note of their movements. He adjusted his pace slightly, scanning the periphery of his vision, noting the shifting shadows, the vague outlines that suggested movement. The city, with its fog and darkness, was an ally and an adversary, concealing threats as easily as it amplified opportunities. Marcy seemed oblivious, caught up in the flow of conversation, the intimacy of shared confidences, and the subtle thrill of being seen and understood. Calvin envied her innocence in that moment, even as he marveled at the skill required to maintain his own composure. He knew that to remain in control, he had to project confidence, warmth, and a sense of effortless command, even when every instinct screamed caution. They stopped at a small bench beneath a street lamp, the light casting a soft halo around them, separating them from the surrounding darkness. Calvin allowed a moment of silence to settle between them, letting the subtle tension of the night work its magic. He could feel Marcy's pulse, quickening slightly, the faint shiver of anticipation that ran through her body. It was the precise reaction he had sought, the small crack in the armor of normalcy that allowed influence to seep in unnoticed. "Do you ever feel," Calvin began softly, his voice low and intimate, "that the world around us is more intricate than it appears?" His eyes met hers, searching, probing, inviting trust. Marcy considered the question, tilting her head slightly. "Sometimes," she admitted, her voice hesitant but sincere. "It's like there are layers we don't see, layers that guide things without our awareness." Her words were exactly what he had hoped for, a subtle acknowledgement of the unseen currents that he so carefully manipulated. Calvin nodded, a faint smile playing across his lips. Exactly, he said. And sometimes, if you know how to read them, you can influence the outcome, even in ways others never imagine. He let the words linger, the meaning intentionally ambiguous, planting seeds of curiosity and intrigue. Marcy's eyes widened slightly, the flicker of interest unmistakable. He had struck a chord, and he knew it. As they walked the remainder of the route to her apartment, Calvin felt a mix of satisfaction and unease. The web was tightening, the threads drawing Marcy closer to the emotional center he had constructed, yet the subtle prickle of danger remained, a reminder that control was never absolute. The city's shadows were patient, waiting, observing, and Calvin knew instinctively that this night, like so many others, carried the potential for both triumph and disaster. At her door, Marcy paused, glancing at him with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly. I enjoyed this." Calvin allowed a small, carefully measured smile. "As did I," he replied, his voice smooth, reassuring, yet carrying the unspoken promise of continued attention, continued involvement. He watched her disappear inside, the door closing with a soft click that echoed in the quiet night. The game had progressed, another layer added to the intricate web he had constructed, yet he remained acutely aware of the fragility of the situation. Returning to the fog-laden streets, Calvin moved with the same precision as before, his senses alert to every subtle shift in the environment. The thrill of the pursuit, the delicate balance of manipulation and observation, was as intoxicating as ever. He knew that tomorrow, and the days that followed, would require even greater skill, patience, and attentiveness. Marcy's trust was a delicate thing, and he intended to cultivate it with care, to draw her ever closer, strand by strand, until the final outcome, whatever it might be, was inescapable. The night seemed to stretch endlessly, each step through the fog-shrouded streets a reminder of the stakes, the tension, and the intoxicating power of subtle influence. Calvin understood that the game he played was not one of brute force or overt control, but of perception, of timing, of the delicate art of suggestion and anticipation. The city itself, alive with unseen eyes and untold possibilities, provided the perfect backdrop for his intricate manipulations, and he moved through it with the precision of a man fully aware of both the potential and the peril that each interaction carried. By the time he reached his apartment, the first hints of dawn were brushing the horizon with muted gray light. Calvin paused at the window, looking out over the city, feeling the pulse of its hidden life, sensing the threads of connection and influence weaving through the night. He knew that the delicate balance of control, desire, and danger had shifted slightly in his favor, yet he remained vigilant. The web was tightening, the game was advancing, and somewhere in the fog and shadows, the next move was already waiting, ready to test his skill, his patience, and his understanding of the intricate, invisible forces at play. The next morning, Calvin awoke to the pale light of dawn seeping through his blinds, painting long, thin stripes across the floor like the fingers of some ghostly hand. The previous night's fog still clung to the city in his mind, its tendrils weaving a sense of tension that refused to dissipate. He had walked Marcy home, carefully maintaining a rhythm of conversation and subtle intimacy, but the thrill of control was tempered by a persistent unease. The game was advancing, the threads pulling tighter, yet the city's shadows whispered that nothing in this delicate dance would remain predictable for long. Calvin dressed with meticulous care, each movement precise, almost ritualistic. He adjusted his tie, checked the fit of his jacket, and ran a hand through his hair, ensuring that the image he presented was one of effortless composure. The mirror reflected a man poised on the edge of obsession and control, every gesture measured, every glance calculated. Today, he told himself, he would need that precision more than ever. Marcy had mentioned a weekend art workshop she planned to attend, an event that promised an intimate setting and a small group of participants. Calvin had seen the opportunity immediately, a chance to advance his subtle influence, to weave new threads of trust and reliance, and to observe her interactions outside the confines of the controlled environment of the bistro. He arrived early, claiming a table near the back, and watched as the participants trickled in, noting their mannerisms, the ease or awkwardness with which they navigated the space, and the small cues of social dynamics. Marcy entered a short while later, her movements fluid and confident, yet tinged with the subtle nervousness he had come to recognize. Their eyes met, and a faint smile passed between them, a private acknowledgement of the game in which only they were participants, even if her awareness was only partial. Calvin greeted her warmly, his voice calm, reassuring, and laced with the unspoken promise of attention and understanding. She responded naturally, unaware of the intricate web being laid around her, each interaction a carefully calibrated step toward his objective. The workshop began with simple exercises in observation and creativity, prompting participants to sketch objects, environments, or fleeting emotions. Calvin observed Marcy closely, noting the subtle choices she made, the way her hand moved across the page, the way her gaze shifted between her surroundings and her work. Every stroke of the pen, every line drawn, was a revelation, a small window into the inner workings of her mind. Calvin's attention to detail was exhaustive, nothing escaped his notice. As the session progressed, he engaged her in conversation, gently probing for personal insights, carefully weaving questions that encouraged disclosure without arousing suspicion. He commented on her technique, complimented her choice of colors, and shared observations that seemed spontaneous but were, in fact, meticulously planned. Marcy responded with interest and appreciation, her guard lowering subtly with each exchange. Calvin felt the familiar thrill of control, tempered by the constant awareness of the fragility of the situation. One misstep, one overreach, and the delicate balance could shatter. Outside, the city's rhythm continued, indifferent to the intimate drama unfolding within the walls of the workshop. Calvin felt the duality of his existence acutely, the careful choreography of manipulation and observation, contrasted against the unpredictable currents of the world around him. He was a man fully aware of the stakes, every action deliberate, every interaction a means of advancing his carefully constructed narrative. During a brief break, Calvin and Marcy stepped outside, the late morning air crisp and invigorating. The conversation was light, bordering on playful, yet underpinned by subtle probes and gestures designed to deepen trust. Calvin allowed her to share small anecdotes, her voice animated, her expressions open and sincere. Each disclosure was a brick in the web he was weaving, a step closer to the emotional entanglement he sought. As they walked back into the workshop, Calvin noticed a man standing near the entrance, observing them with a casual yet deliberate attention. Something about the figure triggered a sense of unease in Calvin, a prickling at the edge of perception that warned of potential interference. The man's presence was not overtly threatening, yet the subtle vigilance, the quiet intent of observation, set Calvin's instincts on edge. He adjusted his approach slightly, maintaining composure while heightening awareness, aware that the game was no longer entirely contained within the safe confines of calculated interaction. The workshop continued, and Calvin's focus remained intense. He noted Marcy's reactions to other participants, her subtle responses to casual compliments, and the fleeting glances that betrayed curiosity or concern. Every detail was catalogued, every nuance a thread to be used in the ongoing construction of influence. He could feel the tension in the room, the interplay of personalities, and the potential for both opportunity and disruption. After the session concluded, Calvin suggested a detour through a nearby park, a quiet place where conversation could continue without interruption. The park was a tapestry of light and shadow, trees casting long, skeletal silhouettes across the path, the occasional gust of wind stirring fallen leaves into swirling patterns. Calvin allowed moments of silence to fall between them, observing her reactions, the subtle shifts in posture and expression that revealed trust, hesitation, or interest. Marcy spoke of her aspirations, the dreams she rarely voiced, the small triumphs she had achieved despite obstacles and self-doubt. Calvin listened intently, offering encouragement that was measured, genuine in tone but calculated in effect. Each affirmation, each subtle display of understanding, was a reinforcement of the connection he was nurturing, a means of drawing her deeper into the web without her conscious recognition. As they walked, the earlier figure reappeared, now closer, lingering near the edge of the path. Calvin felt a spike of tension, his senses alert to the presence, the potential threat it represented. The city's fog seemed to thicken, blending shadow and light, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and suspense. Calvin's mind worked quickly, assessing probabilities, potential outcomes, and strategies for maintaining control while mitigating risk. Despite the underlying tension, Calvin maintained a calm exterior, his demeanor reassuring, his smile effortless. Marcy seemed unaware of the subtle danger, her attention focused on the conversation, on the shared experience of the park, on the sense of safety he projected. Calvin knew the importance of sustaining this perception, the delicate balance between influence and authenticity, between control and the illusion of free will. By the time they returned to her apartment, the day had progressed into late afternoon, the city bathed in a soft, muted light that filtered through the haze. Marcy paused at her door, glancing at Calvin with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. Today was different, she said softly, a trace of wonder in her voice. I feel like I learned something about myself. Calvin allowed a faint, carefully measured smile. Sometimes, he replied, his tone gentle yet laden with subtle suggestion, we discover things about ourselves in the company of others. Especially when those others understand us. The words were simple, but they carried the unspoken implication of guidance, insight, and the promise of continued attention. As Marcy entered her apartment, the door closing with a soft click, Calvin felt a surge of satisfaction tempered by vigilance. The threads were drawing tighter, the influence deepening, yet the presence he had sensed throughout the day reminded him that the game was never without potential disruption. The city, indifferent yet watchful, had its own rules, and he had to remain adaptable, aware, and prepared for the unforeseen. Returning to his own apartment, Calvin sat by the window, watching the interplay of light and shadow across the buildings, the faint movement of figures in the distance, the shifting patterns of fog that seemed to mirror the complexity of his plans. He lit a cigarette, the flame illuminating the lines of concentration etched into his face, and exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of anticipation, of the subtle thrill of control, and of the ever-present awareness of danger. The day had been a success, each interaction a calculated step toward the ultimate goal, yet Calvin understood that the game was far from over. The presence he had noted earlier remained in the back of his mind, a reminder that influence and manipulation were never absolute, that the city's shadows held both opportunity and threat. He knew that the coming days would demand greater skill, patience, and subtlety, as the web he had begun to weave tightened around Marcy, drawing her closer while the potential for unforeseen complications lurked just beyond perception. Night fell once more, bringing with it the familiar shroud of fog and the distant hum of a city alive with hidden currents. Calvin leaned against the window, cigarette in hand, and allowed himself a moment of reflection. The delicate balance of trust, influence, and desire had been maintained today, yet the underlying tension, the prickle of potential interference, the whisper of unseen observers, remained, reminding him that control was always provisional, contingent, and precarious. In the distance, a siren wailed, cutting through the night, a reminder that chaos lurked beyond even the most carefully constructed plans. Calvin watched the fog roll over the streets, the light of the city muted and diffused, and felt the intoxicating mixture of power and vulnerability that came with the game he played. Marcy's trust was fragile, her curiosity piqued, her defenses lowered, yet the next move, the crucial, decisive maneuver, would require precision, timing, and an awareness of both the visible and invisible forces in play. The city seemed to pulse in response, alive with possibility and threat, and Calvin knew instinctively that the strands he had woven were now beginning to pull, carrying Marcy along a path carefully laid but not yet completed. The night was long, the game ongoing, and the delicate interplay of influence, desire, and danger stretched ahead, each moment a test of skill, patience, and perception. The following morning, Calvin awoke to the muted light filtering through the blinds, the city outside still shrouded in a haze that seemed to mirror the tension in his mind. There was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a sense that the threads he had woven around Marcy were stretching, tugging, pulling at the edges of perception, yet not without resistance. He rose carefully, the precision of his movements almost ritualistic, each step in the morning routine a rehearsal of control, a preparation for the delicate dance that lay ahead. Today, Calvin decided, he would take a more proactive approach. The subtle influence he had been cultivating required reinforcement, a series of carefully orchestrated interactions to deepen Marcy's reliance on his presence. Yet he also sensed, in the periphery of awareness, the shadow of a potential complication, the silent observer from the park, the figure at the workshop, the unaccountable unease that lingered like a phantom whisper in his mind. Each layer of observation, each thread of connection, carried the dual possibility of opportunity and peril, and Calvin moved with measured caution. Marcy's routine at the bistro had settled into predictable rhythms, her movements fluid, her expressions subtly revealing, and Calvin had learned to anticipate her reactions, to prepare responses that would feel spontaneous but were, in fact, carefully calibrated. He arrived early, as always, occupying a table with a view that allowed him to observe both the ebb and flow of activity and the subtle signals of her mood. The familiarity of the environment provided comfort, yet also served as a stage upon which the next act of influence could unfold. Marcy appeared shortly thereafter, her presence a combination of warmth and guarded curiosity. Calvin noted the slight hesitation in her step, the way her eyes scanned the room before settling on him. The momentary flicker of vigilance in her gaze was precisely the type of reaction he had learned to interpret, a delicate indication of engagement and awareness. He greeted her with effortless warmth, his voice carrying the familiar cadence of reassurance and interest, and observed the subtle relaxation that followed, a small victory in the ongoing negotiation of trust. Their conversation began lightly, with remarks about the day, the weather, and the occasional trivial anecdote, yet Calvin's questions were always layered, designed to elicit insight, to reveal vulnerabilities, to open windows into her thoughts without triggering suspicion. He commented on her attire, noting with casual interest the choices she had made, the colors and textures, linking them subtly to personal associations and memories she might not have consciously acknowledged. Marcy responded naturally, her curiosity piqued, unaware of the careful architecture of influence being constructed around her. After the initial exchanges, Calvin suggested a walk, a brief excursion to a nearby art supply shop that he had reason to believe she favored. The journey was mundane in appearance, yet within it lay countless opportunities for observation and subtle manipulation. He noticed the way she adjusted her bag, the rhythm of her steps, the fleeting glances she cast at shop windows and pedestrians. Each detail was catalogued, analyzed, and stored, a reservoir of data to inform future interactions, to guide the dance of trust and influence with precision. Inside the shop, the familiar scent of paper, paint, and varnish enveloped them. Marcy moved with a practiced ease, selecting brushes and sketchbooks, her choices revealing preferences and patterns. Calvin engaged her in conversation, offering insights that seemed spontaneous but were carefully constructed to reinforce a sense of shared understanding. "I always notice how the smallest details can transform a piece," he said, observing her reactions, the subtle lift of her brow, the faint smile of acknowledgement. Each response was a gauge, a measure of her receptivity to his guidance and subtle manipulation. The shopkeeper's voice echoed faintly from the counter, but Calvin's attention remained on Marcy, noting the nuances of her engagement, the micro-expressions that revealed both openness and hesitation. He observed the way her fingers lingered on certain brushes, the tilt of her head as she evaluated sketchbooks, the gentle sigh of contemplation. It was a ballet of subtle signals, each movement a word in an unspoken dialogue, and Calvin, ever attentive, responded with the precision of a conductor guiding an orchestra. As they left the shop, bags in hand, Calvin suggested a detour to a quiet square nearby, where a small fountain cast rippling reflections in the late morning light. The square was deserted, save for a few pedestrians moving with casual purpose, and Calvin used the opportunity to continue the subtle weaving of influence. He initiated conversation about her work, her aspirations, and the emotions that inspired her art. Marcy responded, revealing layers of thought and feeling that had previously remained private, her tone a mixture of amusement, curiosity, and tentative vulnerability. Calvin's mind catalogued each disclosure with meticulous care, noting patterns, inconsistencies, and opportunities for future leverage. Every word spoken, every gesture made, was a potential instrument of influence, and he played them with the skill of a master artisan, shaping perceptions and emotions without overt coercion. Marcy's guard lowered gradually, the invisible threads drawing tighter, a web of connection and subtle dependency forming around her awareness. Yet amid the satisfaction of progress, Calvin remained vigilant. The city outside, indifferent yet omnipresent, continued its subtle choreography of shadows and movement. He sensed the latent presence of the observer from previous encounters, a phantom awareness that lurked just beyond the periphery of his perception. It was a reminder that control was never absolute, that the intricate dance of influence and trust was always susceptible to disruption. As they walked through the square, Calvin allowed a brief moment of silence to settle between them. He observed Marcy's posture, the slight tilt of her head, the way her eyes lingered on his face, and interpreted these as signals of trust, curiosity, and engagement. He permitted himself a faint smile, a gesture that was both reassuring and subtly suggestive, reinforcing the sense of intimacy while maintaining the illusion of casual interaction. The walk continued toward a small, secluded cafe tucked into a corner street, a place he had selected for its privacy and the control it offered over the environment. They seated themselves near a window, and Calvin ordered drinks with the casual efficiency of someone who had mastered the art of creating comfort and influence simultaneously. Conversation resumed, flowing easily yet subtly guided, a careful balance of disclosure, validation, and gentle suggestion. Marcy spoke of a recent setback in her work, a project that had not met her expectations, and Calvin listened attentively, offering comments that validated her feelings while subtly reframing the situation. Sometimes, he said, the challenges we face are less about the outcome and more about the insight they provide. Each experience reveals something hidden, something essential. His words were deliberately ambiguous, yet carried an underlying current of guidance and reassurance, encouraging introspection and reliance on his perspective. The afternoon stretched into evening, the soft light fading and the city around them taking on the muted glow of streetlights and fading daylight. Calvin remained alert, aware of every shift in atmosphere, every passing figure, every subtle change in Marcy's demeanor. The observer he had sensed earlier was nowhere in sight, yet the potential for interference lingered like a shadow at the edge of consciousness. The game required constant vigilance, a careful orchestration of perception and reaction, and Calvin was fully engaged in maintaining the delicate balance. As they concluded their visit to the cafe, Calvin suggested a brief walk back toward her apartment. The streets were quieter now, the fog of early evening beginning to settle, and Calvin used the opportunity to reinforce the subtle threads of connection he had been weaving throughout the day. Conversation remained light yet intimate, punctuated by moments of reflective silence that allowed the emotional tension to develop naturally. At her door, Marcy paused, glancing up at him with a mixture of gratitude and lingering curiosity. "Today was really nice," she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of vulnerability. I feel like I understand a little more about myself." Calvin's faint smile conveyed satisfaction and reassurance, the careful modulation of expression reinforcing the sense of trust and connection he had cultivated. "Understanding comes in layers," he replied, his tone gentle yet imbued with subtle authority. "Sometimes the most profound insights are discovered in the company of someone who observes closely and listens carefully." The words were deliberately suggestive, encouraging a reliance on his presence while maintaining the illusion of casual interaction. As Marcy entered her apartment, the door closing behind her, Calvin lingered momentarily in the street, observing the interplay of light and shadow across the buildings, the soft movements of passers-by, the faint echoes of distant city sounds. The day had been successful, each interaction carefully managed, each disclosure interpreted and catalogued, yet the lingering sense of potential disruption remained, a reminder that the web he had constructed was both powerful and fragile. Returning to his own apartment, Calvin settled by the window, cigarette in hand, watching the city breathe and pulse below. The strands he had woven around Marcy had tightened, her trust deepening, her vulnerability increasingly apparent, yet the unseen observer, the phantom tension, reminded him that control was provisional, dependent on constant vigilance and adaptability. The game continued, each day, each interaction, a careful negotiation of influence, perception, and desire. Night fell, enveloping the city in fog and shadow. Calvin felt the familiar mix of anticipation, satisfaction, and unease, knowing that the next moves would require even greater skill, patience, and subtlety. The strands he had spun were pulling Marcy toward him, yet the threads were delicate, the balance precarious, and the city around them was alive with unseen eyes and untold possibilities. The game was far from over, and the next act, the next subtle maneuver, awaited him with quiet, inexorable inevitability. The next morning brought a muted sunlight that filtered lazily through the tall buildings, painting the streets in a soft, golden haze. Calvin awoke with the memory of the previous day still vivid in his mind, the intricate dance of observation, influence, and subtle manipulation. Each encounter with Marcy had been a careful layering of trust and curiosity, and he knew that the strands of connection were drawing ever tighter. Yet beneath the satisfaction of progress lingered a persistent unease, a whisper that suggested the game was far from under his full control. He moved through his morning routine with the same deliberate precision he always employed, each movement a rehearsal of control, each gesture a reflection of the meticulous order that governed his life. The mirror reflected a man fully aware of his intentions, yet aware, too, of the precariousness of influence. The world outside remained a theater of potential interference, of unpredictable movements and unforeseen consequences, and Calvin's instincts were attuned to every nuance, every subtle signal that might hint at disruption. Marcy had mentioned an upcoming gallery opening, a small event that promised an intimate gathering of artists and enthusiasts. Calvin recognized immediately the opportunity it presented, a setting both controlled and social, where observation and subtle influence could operate in concert. He arrived early, claiming a vantage point that allowed him to monitor both Marcy and the flow of participants, cataloging their mannerisms, interactions, and the subtle dynamics that revealed personality and intent. When Marcy arrived, Calvin noted the slight tension in her posture, the careful way she scanned the room before her eyes settled on him. The familiar smile passed between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of their shared rhythm, a signal that the dance of influence and trust was ongoing. Calvin greeted her warmly, his voice steady, inviting, and subtly persuasive, and observed the way her shoulders relaxed under the reassurance of his presence. The gallery itself was a study in contrasts, light and shadow, color and texture, stillness and movement. Calvin moved with practiced awareness, guiding Marcy through the exhibits while maintaining a careful balance between observation and engagement. Each painting, sculpture, and installation became a focal point for conversation, a vehicle for subtle probing and gentle encouragement. Calvin commented on the nuances of brushwork, the interplay of color, the emotional resonance of the pieces, and watched the way Marcy responded, her expressions and gestures revealing layers of thought and feeling. At one point, they paused before a large, abstract canvas, its chaotic brushstrokes a reflection of raw emotion. Calvin allowed a moment of silence, letting the tension of the scene work subtly upon Marcy. Art, he said softly, often reveals what we cannot say in words. It's a mirror of the mind, of hidden fears, and desires we scarcely acknowledge. His gaze met hers, steady and compelling, and he watched as a flicker of recognition passed through her eyes, a subtle acknowledgement of the shared understanding he had cultivated. Marcy spoke then, her voice low, reflective, revealing glimpses of personal struggle and aspiration. Calvin listened attentively, nodding with encouragement, validating her experiences without overt suggestion. Each disclosure was a thread woven into the web he was constructing, each moment of trust reinforcing the subtle influence he exercised. The gallery's muted lighting, the soft murmur of conversation around them, and the careful control of their environment created the perfect conditions for his intricate work. As they moved through the room, Calvin remained vigilant. The memory of the mysterious observer lingered at the edges of his awareness, a shadow that refused to dissipate. Though no one seemed to watch them overtly, the sense of being observed, of potential interference, added a tension that sharpened his focus and heightened his alertness. Every movement, every glance, every conversation had to be carefully calibrated, for the slightest misstep could fracture the fragile trust he had nurtured. During a brief interlude in the gallery's courtyard, Calvin allowed a moment of casual intimacy. They sat on a bench beneath a pergola, sunlight filtering through the latticework above. The air was scented with blooming flowers, and the gentle rustle of leaves created a quiet symphony. Calvin spoke softly of his own experiences, his words chosen with precision to guide, reassure, and subtly influence. Marcy responded with openness, sharing thoughts and feelings that deepened the connection, unaware of the careful architecture of manipulation being laid around her. The afternoon stretched onward, and Calvin suggested they walk to a nearby cafe, a place he had scouted for its privacy and the subtle control it offered over social interaction. Conversation flowed easily, punctuated by reflective silences and gentle probes that encouraged disclosure without triggering suspicion. Calvin's attention remained keen, cataloging every detail, the tone of her voice, the rhythm of her gestures, the micro-expressions that revealed curiosity, hesitation, or engagement. As they sat sipping coffee, Marcy's attention drifted briefly to a group of other patrons, her gaze lingering on an artist sketching nearby. Calvin seized the opportunity to comment lightly on her observation, subtly framing the discussion in a way that guided her perception and encouraged reliance on his insight. "It's interesting," he said, "how we notice different things in others. Sometimes what catches our attention tells us more about ourselves than the observer." Marcy nodded, her eyes thoughtful, and Calvin recognized the subtle shift of influence, the reinforcement of trust, and the deepening of the invisible threads connecting them. The day wore on, and the light outside began to fade, casting long shadows across the streets. Calvin and Marcy walked back toward her apartment, the rhythm of their movement a continuation of the subtle choreography they had established over previous encounters. Each step, each gesture, each casual remark was an instrument of influence, a thread pulling them closer in a web that remained largely unseen and unacknowledged. As they approached her building, Calvin noticed a shadow detach itself from a nearby alleyway, a figure moving with deliberate caution yet maintaining a degree of concealment. His pulse quickened imperceptibly, the familiar tension of potential disruption sharpening his senses. He allowed no outward sign of awareness, but internally, every instinct was alert, cataloging possibilities, potential threats, and strategies for maintaining control. Marcy paused at her door, glancing at him with a mixture of curiosity and lingering trust. "Today was remarkable," she said softly, her voice tinged with wonder and introspection. I feel like I've seen a part of myself I didn't know was there." Calvin's faint smile conveyed reassurance and satisfaction, the careful modulation of expression reinforcing the subtle influence he had cultivated throughout the day. "Sometimes," he replied, his tone gentle and deliberately ambiguous, "we discover hidden layers only when someone guides us gently through the experience. Insight often arrives in the company of careful observation and understanding." His words, simple yet weighted with implication, reinforced reliance, deepened trust, and subtly positioned him as both confidant and guide. Marcy entered her apartment, closing the door behind her, leaving Calvin standing in the street for a brief moment, absorbing the fading light and the shifting shadows. The day had been a success, each interaction orchestrated, each nuance observed, each thread of influence strengthened. Yet the city outside, alive with hidden currents, reminded him that control was provisional, that the delicate balance of trust, desire, and manipulation could be disrupted at any moment. Calvin returned to his own apartment, lit a cigarette, and allowed himself a measured exhale, the smoke curling upward in the soft glow of the evening. The strands he had woven were tightening, the web of influence around Marcy becoming increasingly intricate, yet the subtle presence of unseen observers, the memory of the shadowed figure in the alleyway, maintained a persistent tension. Control was never absolute, and vigilance remained essential. Night fell fully, and Calvin stood at the window, observing the city, the fog beginning to roll in once more, swallowing light and sound in its opaque embrace. The game continued, each day, each interaction, a careful negotiation of trust, influence, and perception. The threads that bound Marcy closer were both fragile and resilient, and Calvin knew that the next moves, the next subtle maneuvers, would determine whether the web held fast or unraveled under the weight of unseen forces. The thrill of the game, the intoxicating mixture of power and anticipation, pulsed through him. Each step forward in his intricate design required patience, subtlety, and unwavering attention to the smallest details. The city, with its shadows, its fog, and its hidden currents, remained both ally and adversary, providing both opportunity and the ever-present possibility of disruption. Calvin exhaled, feeling the weight of the evening and the promise of the next day. The strands were pulling, the web was tightening, and the game was far from over. The next day dawned with a pale, diffused light that lent the city a spectral calm, as though the streets themselves were holding their breath. Calvin awoke, mindful of the lingering tension that had settled like a fine mist over his life. Each previous encounter with Marcy had been a careful negotiation of influence and observation, but he sensed that the next stage of his design required subtle escalation. The threads he had woven were taut, delicate, and ready to carry the weight of deeper engagement, yet he remained vigilant for any disruption that might arise from the unseen currents of the city. His morning routine was performed with deliberate exactness. Every gesture, every movement, was a rehearsal in control, a calibration of thought and action. The reflection in the mirror revealed a man fully aware of both his intentions and the potential fragility of the web he had spun. There was no room for error, no space for improvisation beyond what he had calculated. The unseen observer from the gallery and the park remained at the periphery of his mind, a shadowed reminder that vigilance must never lapse. Marcy had mentioned an art critique session at a small, private studio that evening, a gathering of artists where she hoped to receive feedback on her work. Calvin saw the opportunity immediately. A confined, controlled social setting meant he could guide interactions subtly, observe her reactions under pressure, and reinforce the strands of trust and reliance he had been cultivating. Arriving early, he secured a seat with a full view of the room, cataloging the layout, noting exits, entrances, and the subtle dynamics of social tension among the attendees. When Marcy arrived, her expression carried the familiar mix of curiosity and guarded openness. Calvin's presence seemed to calm her, a silent reassurance that allowed her vulnerability to surface in measured increments. He greeted her with the same effortless warmth he had perfected, and she responded naturally, the faint flicker of trust in her eyes a reward for his careful orchestration. The session began, and Calvin immediately immersed himself in observation, noting every nuance, the tilt of her head, the cadence of her voice, the micro-expressions that betrayed inner thought. The critique session was lively, punctuated by moments of tension, praise, and constructive feedback. Calvin watched closely, guiding Marcy's engagement with subtle suggestions, positioning comments, and carefully timed affirmations. He allowed her to voice her thoughts fully, listening with keen attentiveness, reinforcing confidence without overt interference. Each word spoken, each gesture made, was a deliberate thread in the tapestry of influence he was weaving. During a brief break, Calvin suggested a walk outside, to the narrow, quiet alley that ran along the side of the studio. The afternoon sun was fading, casting elongated shadows across the cobblestones, and the air was tinged with the scent of rain from the night before. As they walked, Calvin initiated conversation that was both light and intimate, encouraging Marcy to reflect on her own creative process and the emotional resonance of her work. Each question was carefully crafted to elicit introspection while maintaining the illusion of casual dialogue. Marcy spoke freely, revealing anxieties and triumphs she rarely shared with others. Calvin listened with deliberate focus, offering validation and subtle guidance that reinforced her reliance on his insight. The strands of trust pulled tighter, a web of psychological influence that was nearly invisible yet undeniably present. Calvin observed the flickers of gratitude, curiosity, and vulnerability that crossed her expression, cataloging each as a data point for future engagement. As they returned to the studio, Calvin's awareness sharpened. The city, with its muted bustle and shifting shadows, seemed to hold an undercurrent of watchfulness. The presence he had felt in previous days, the observer, the silent, almost imperceptible threat, hovered at the edge of perception. Though no figure was overtly present, the knowledge that unseen eyes might follow their movements added a tension that honed his focus, forcing a constant vigilance as he navigated the delicate dynamics of social interaction. The critique session resumed, and Calvin remained attentive. Marcy's work received thoughtful commentary from other participants, and Calvin's subtle interventions guided her responses, ensuring she maintained confidence while appearing naturally engaged. The interplay of social pressure, vulnerability, and reinforcement created a fertile ground for influence. Calvin's observations extended beyond Marcy, encompassing the behaviors of other artists, their reactions to her responses, and the social hierarchies that emerged within the confined space. At one point, a senior artist offered pointed criticism of Marcy's technique, a challenge to her self-assurance. Calvin seized the moment, offering a gentle, measured defense that framed the critique constructively while highlighting her strengths. Marcy's posture relaxed, her expression softened, and Calvin recognized the deepening of trust that came from navigating perceived adversity together. The interplay of tension and reassurance reinforced the subtle bond he had cultivated, pulling her closer while maintaining the appearance of casual camaraderie. After the session concluded, Calvin suggested a brief detour through a nearby park, a place of calm that allowed conversation to continue in a controlled yet intimate setting. The park was quiet, the early evening light casting long, skeletal shadows across paths lined with trees. Calvin allowed moments of silence, observing Marcy's reactions to her environment, her gestures, her expressions. Each movement was a cue, each glance a data point, every subtle indication of mood or thought catalogued meticulously. Marcy spoke then of her ambitions, the dreams that had been shaped by years of self-doubt and modest achievement. Calvin listened, offering comments that reinforced her confidence, suggested perspective, and subtly positioned himself as an ally, a guide, a reliable presence. Each interaction was a strategic reinforcement, a deliberate shaping of perception that advanced the intricate web of influence he had constructed. As twilight deepened, the shadows lengthened, and Calvin noted a figure moving in the distance, a silhouette that lingered at the edge of the park. Though partially obscured, the movement was deliberate, a silent reminder that unseen observation remained a factor in their lives. Calvin's pulse quickened, yet he maintained an outward calm, his demeanor reassuring, his smile measured, his attention on Marcy while his awareness tracked the potential threat. The balance between engagement and vigilance was delicate, and Calvin navigated it with practiced precision. They walked back toward Marcy's apartment, the rhythm of their movement a continuation of the subtle choreography they had established over the preceding days. Calvin allowed casual intimacy to flourish, the conversation flowing naturally, punctuated by gentle laughter, reflective pauses, and moments of unspoken understanding. Each step, each word, each gesture reinforced the threads of influence, drawing Marcy deeper into the web while maintaining the appearance of spontaneous connection. At her door, Marcy paused, glancing at him with a mixture of curiosity and appreciation. "Tonight I feel like I've seen things about my work, and myself, I never realized before," she said softly, her tone a combination of wonder and tentative trust. Calvin's faint smile conveyed both reassurance and subtle encouragement, a reinforcement of the bond he had carefully nurtured. "Insight," he said gently, often arrives when we are guided through reflection by someone who observes with care and listens with intention. The words were simple, yet carried a deliberate undertone of influence, positioning him as both confident and subtle guide. Marcy entered her apartment, closing the door behind her, leaving Calvin to linger in the street for a brief moment, absorbing the interplay of light, shadow, and distant city movement. Returning to his own apartment, Calvin settled by the window, cigarette in hand, and observed the city breathing beneath him. The strands he had woven were taut, the web of influence around Marcy increasingly intricate, yet the lingering sense of observation, the memory of the shadowed figure in the park, maintained a subtle tension. Control was never absolute, vigilance remained essential, and the game continued, each day a delicate negotiation of trust, perception, and psychological engagement. Night settled fully, draping the city in fog and muted light. Calvin felt the familiar mixture of satisfaction, anticipation, and unease. The threads were pulling, Marcy's trust was deepening, and the web was nearing its full potential. Yet the unseen observer, the city's shadows, and the delicate balance of influence reminded him that the next moves required precision, patience, and an acute awareness of both the visible and invisible forces at play. The thrill of the game, the intoxicating blend of power, insight, and anticipation, pulsed through him. Each step, each word, each subtle maneuver carried weight, and Calvin knew instinctively that the coming days would demand even greater skill and vigilance. The strands were tightening, the web was drawing Marcy ever closer, and the game, fragile, complex, and ever dangerous, was far from over. The morning air was crisp with the faint tang of impending rain, the city streets glistening with moisture from an overnight drizzle. Calvin awoke with the habitual tension that accompanied the intricate design of his daily life. Each encounter with Marcy had been a delicate layering of observation, influence, and control, and the strands of connection were now taut with subtle power. Yet, beneath the satisfaction of progress lingered the ever-present awareness that the web could unravel with the smallest miscalculation, or under the gaze of the unseen observer whose presence he felt like a shadow at the edge of perception. His morning routine was executed with meticulous precision. Every movement, from the adjustment of his tie to the careful selection of clothing, was part of an internal rehearsal of control. The reflection in the mirror showed a man poised between mastery and anticipation, fully aware of his objectives, yet equally cognizant of the fragility of the delicate network of influence he had cultivated. The day ahead promised both opportunity and risk, and Calvin approached it with the patience of a strategist and the alertness of a predator. Marcy had mentioned a small poetry reading at a local cafe in the late afternoon, a gathering she seemed eager to attend yet anxious about navigating. Calvin immediately recognized the potential, an intimate, public environment, structured yet social, where subtle guidance could reinforce trust and allow him to observe her under the subtle pressure of social expectation. He arrived early, positioning himself in a location that allowed for both observation and influence, noting the arrangement of tables, lighting, and entrances. When Marcy arrived, Calvin noted the familiar tension in her gait and posture, the careful way her eyes scanned the cafe before settling on him. Their shared smile was a silent acknowledgement of the ongoing dance, a reinforcement of the rhythm they had established over previous encounters. Calvin's greeting was warm, composed, and suggestive of subtle reassurance, prompting the familiar relaxation in Marcy's demeanor that signaled the strands of influence were once again drawing tighter. The poetry reading began, and Calvin observed Marcy carefully. Each poem read aloud, each intonation, gesture, or pause offered him data to process, revealing nuances of emotion, preference, and perceptual patterns. He commented occasionally on her reactions, subtly guiding her attention and interpretation, while never imposing overt influence. Each interaction was a brushstroke in a carefully constructed tableau, reinforcing the psychological architecture he had been building. During a brief intermission, Calvin suggested they step outside to the small patio, sheltered under an awning. The air was cool, carrying the scent of wet stone and earth, and the quiet hum of city life was muted by the gentle patter of remaining raindrops. The conversation was light, bordering on intimate, with Calvin carefully crafting remarks that encouraged introspection while subtly positioning himself as a trusted presence. Marcy responded with openness, revealing concerns and hopes she had not previously shared, her gestures and tone betraying a growing reliance on his attention and approval. Calvin catalogued every nuance with meticulous care, the tilt of her head, the cadence of her laughter, the slight hesitation in her voice before particular admissions. Each signal was a thread to be woven into the web of influence, reinforcing her dependence on his insight and presence. The strands were drawing ever tighter, an invisible lattice connecting their thoughts and emotions, though Marcy remained largely unaware of the subtle manipulation underpinning each interaction. As they returned to the cafe, Calvin remained acutely aware of the city's rhythm, the flow of pedestrians, and the shifting interplay of shadows and light. He sensed again the lingering presence of the observer, a phantom awareness that required constant vigilance. Though no one appeared overtly to be watching, the tension sharpened his focus, reminding him that control was provisional and that any lapse could unravel the careful progress he had achieved. The poetry reading resumed, and Calvin's attention remained fixed on Marcy. Her responses to the readings, her expressions of amusement, reflection, or subtle discomfort, provided insight into her emotional landscape. He guided these experiences with carefully chosen comments, affirmations, and questions that maintained a sense of spontaneity while reinforcing his role as confident and subtle guide. Each moment of shared understanding, each acknowledgement of emotion, tightened the strands of influence without alerting Marcy to the calculated nature of their interaction. As the session concluded, Calvin suggested a quiet walk through a nearby garden courtyard, a place of relative solitude where the shadows of evening cast long, intricate patterns across the cobblestones. The environment was perfect for continued engagement, intimate, controlled, and yet socially plausible. Calvin allowed moments of silence to fall between them, observing her subtle reactions, the flicker of curiosity in her eyes, the delicate interplay of tension and ease in her posture. Each observation informed his strategy, guiding the continued weaving of the invisible web around her. Marcy spoke softly of her experiences, revealing layers of vulnerability and ambition that she had not previously articulated. Calvin listened with apparent casual attentiveness, reinforcing her confidence, guiding perception, and subtly positioning himself as a stabilizing presence. The strands of influence tightened further, each moment of trust, each glimpse of self-revelation, a deliberate step in the complex choreography he had orchestrated. Yet amid the satisfaction of this psychological symphony, Calvin remained alert. The city's subtle currents, the shadowed alleys, and the memory of the distant observer reminded him that nothing was entirely secure. Influence, he understood, was provisional, contingent on constant awareness, and he navigated this tension with practiced care, balancing engagement, control, and subtle anticipation of unforeseen events. The evening deepened, and the soft light of the garden dimmed, shadows folding into one another, creating a labyrinth of uncertainty. Calvin allowed casual intimacy to flourish within the constraints of their carefully managed interaction, maintaining conversation, guiding responses, and observing her emotional and physical cues with the precision of a seasoned strategist. Every word, every gesture, every subtle shift in tone or glance contributed to the architecture of influence he had built over the days. As they approached her apartment, Calvin noticed movement at the edge of his vision, a shadow detaching itself from a nearby alley, lingering with deliberate caution. His pulse increased subtly, yet he maintained composure, ensuring that his presence remained reassuring for Marcy while internally cataloging the new variable. The delicate balance of influence and awareness required that he integrate this observation seamlessly, reinforcing the illusion of safety while preparing for potential disruption. Marcy paused at her door, her expression reflective, tinged with both curiosity and gratitude. "Tonight was remarkable," she said softly, her voice carrying a trace of awe. "I feel like I've learned something about myself." Calvin's smile was faint, measured, and reassuring, reinforcing trust while subtly suggesting the value of his guidance. Insight, he said gently, often comes when someone observes closely and listens with intention. Sometimes, the guidance of a careful presence allows us to discover layers we never knew existed. The words were deliberately suggestive, reinforcing reliance on him while maintaining the appearance of natural conversation. Marcy entered her apartment, closing the door behind her, leaving Calvin momentarily in the street, absorbing the interplay of light, shadow, and the subtle rhythm of the city around him. Returning to his apartment, Calvin stood by the window, cigarette in hand, watching the city breathe beneath him. The web he had constructed around Marcy was taut, intricate, and increasingly potent, yet the persistent awareness of the observer, the faint movement of shadows, and the unpredictable flow of the city maintained an undercurrent of tension. Control, he knew, was always provisional. The strands could tighten or unravel with the slightest perturbation. Night settled fully over the city, enveloping streets, buildings, and alleyways in fog and shadow. Calvin exhaled slowly, allowing himself a moment of satisfaction tempered by vigilance. The strands of influence were pulling Marcy closer, the web he had woven delicate yet strong, yet he understood instinctively that the next moves would demand even greater precision, patience, and strategic foresight. The game continued, a careful negotiation of trust, perception, and subtle manipulation, alive with both opportunity and danger. The thrill of control, the intoxicating blend of anticipation and power, pulsed through him. Each carefully orchestrated interaction, each moment of influence, and each subtle psychological maneuver reinforced the lattice of connection. Calvin knew that the coming days would test his skill and resolve, the strands of trust and manipulation poised to tighten further or fray under unseen forces. The game, fragile and complex, was far from over, and the next moves awaited with inexorable inevitability. The following morning carried with it a peculiar stillness, the kind that seemed to press against the city like an unseen weight. Calvin awoke with a heightened awareness, the memory of the previous day's intricate dances still vivid, each encounter with Marcy resonating in his mind like the echoes of a carefully struck chord. The strands of influence were taut, delicate, and interwoven with layers of trust and subtle dependence, yet the persistent presence of potential disruption, the unseen observer, the hidden eyes, the unpredictable movement of the city, kept his vigilance razor-sharp. His morning routine proceeded with habitual exactitude. Each movement, from the adjustment of his jacket to the methodical brushing of teeth, was a rehearsal in precision, a calibration of control. The reflection in the mirror showed a man poised at the intersection of patience and anticipation, fully aware of his objectives and yet attuned to the fragility of the web he had constructed. Every day brought opportunity, but also the constant threat of complication, and Calvin approached the morning with the measured care of a strategist preparing for an unseen battle. Marcy had mentioned a small workshop that afternoon, a demonstration of techniques and styles by a visiting artist. Calvin recognized immediately the potential for observation and subtle guidance, a public yet intimate environment where influence could be exercised while remaining nearly invisible. He arrived early, selecting a seat that offered a clear view of the room, noting the spatial arrangement, the dynamics of attendees, and potential exits or disruptions. Every detail was catalogued, every subtle movement stored as part of the ongoing data set that informed his strategy. When Marcy arrived, Calvin noted the familiar micro-expressions, the slight tension in her shoulders, the brief scanning of the room, the reassurance that came from locking eyes with him. Their shared smile, a quiet acknowledgement of rhythm and trust, served as both anchor and signal. Calvin's greeting was warm yet subtly authoritative, and Marcy responded with the relaxation he had trained her to exhibit, her body language signaling both comfort and receptiveness. The workshop commenced, and Calvin's attention was divided with surgical precision. He observed Marcy's interactions, her responses to critique, and the subtle expressions that revealed confidence, hesitation, or latent anxiety. His guidance was woven seamlessly into the dialogue, comments that appeared casual yet were designed to reinforce her perception of insight, affirm her abilities, and subtly deepen reliance on his presence. Each exchange, each observation, each carefully calibrated gesture reinforced the invisible strands of influence. During a brief intermission, Calvin suggested a walk outside, a corridor lined with iron railings and potted plants, a path that offered a measure of privacy within a public setting. The air carried the faint scent of rain and earth, and the subdued hum of city life provided an ambient backdrop to their conversation. Calvin guided dialogue with subtlety, asking questions that encouraged introspection while appearing to invite casual reflection. Marcy responded openly, revealing thoughts and concerns she had not previously articulated, each disclosure a thread woven into the intricate web of influence. Calvin catalogued every micro-expression, every hesitation, every intonation with meticulous care. The tilt of her head, the subtle pause before certain admissions, the flicker of curiosity or doubt, all were stored as potential leverage for guiding future interactions. The strands were pulling ever tighter, the lattice of psychological influence near invisible, yet growing in strength and complexity. Marcy's awareness of the orchestration remained minimal, the perception of spontaneity preserved even as her thoughts and emotions were guided with precision. Returning to the workshop, Calvin maintained his focus. The environment, though public, offered rich opportunities for subtle guidance. Critiques were navigated with careful phrasing, observations framed to reinforce Marcy's confidence while simultaneously highlighting areas for reflection. Each interaction, however casual in appearance, was an exercise in shaping perception, reinforcing trust, and deepening reliance on Calvin's insight. A senior participant questioned Marcy's technique, offering a critique that could have undermined her confidence. Calvin intervened gently, his words both protective and subtly suggestive. Her approach has merit because it reflects a personal vision that resonates beyond technique alone. Marcy's posture softened, her expression relaxed, and Calvin noted the further tightening of the web, another small victory in the delicate negotiation of influence. The session ended, and Calvin suggested a detour to a quiet avenue leading toward a small, rarely frequented cafe. The streets were damp, the evening light casting long shadows, and the environment allowed for continued engagement without overt exposure. Conversation flowed easily, punctuated by reflective pauses and moments of gentle intimacy. Calvin observed, guided, and reinforced the invisible strands of influence, drawing Marcy closer into the orbit of his carefully calibrated presence. Yet despite the apparent calm, Calvin's awareness remained acute. Shadows shifted in the periphery of his vision, and the memory of the mysterious observer persisted. Though no figure moved overtly, the awareness of potential surveillance, the shadowed alleyways, the unremarkable pedestrians, added a tension that sharpened his focus. Every word, every gesture, every subtle cue was both a reinforcement of connection and a calculated precaution against disruption. As they neared Marcy's apartment, Calvin sensed a faint movement at the edge of the street, a shadow that detached itself from a building and lingered with deliberate slowness. His pulse quickened imperceptibly, though he maintained composure outwardly, ensuring Marcy felt reassurance rather than tension. He catalogued the figure as a potential variable, integrating it seamlessly into the matrix of vigilance that governed his actions. The balance between engagement and awareness, trust and observation, was delicate, requiring constant calibration. At her door, Marcy paused, glancing at him with the familiar mixture of curiosity, gratitude, and trust. "Today I feel like I've uncovered a part of myself I hadn't seen before," she said softly. Calvin's smile was subtle yet reassuring, reinforcing the delicate bond while maintaining the illusion of casual interaction. Self-discovery often comes in the company of someone who observes closely and listens with intention, he replied gently, his words deliberately layered with influence. Sometimes, guidance is less about instruction and more about careful companionship through reflection. Marcy entered her apartment, closing the door behind her, leaving Calvin standing briefly in the street, absorbing the muted light and the intricate dance of shadows around him. Returning to his apartment, Calvin stood by the window, cigarette in hand, observing the city below. The strands of influence were taut, the web increasingly potent, yet the memory of the shadowed observer, the latent presence of unknown variables, maintained a subtle tension. Control remained provisional, the web could tighten or fray with the slightest perturbation. Each interaction, each subtle maneuver, each carefully placed word was a step in an ongoing negotiation of perception, trust, and influence. Night descended fully, wrapping the city in fog, shadow, and muted light. Calvin exhaled slowly, allowing himself a measured satisfaction tempered by vigilance. The web he had spun around Marcy was intricate, delicate, and powerful, yet the unseen observer, the shifting city, and the unpredictable human elements ensured that the game was far from concluded. The strands were pulling, the web was tightening, and the next moves required precision, patience, and awareness of both the visible and invisible forces at play. The thrill of engagement, the intoxicating blend of anticipation, control, and strategic foresight, pulsed through him. Each interaction, each subtle maneuver, each carefully calibrated suggestion reinforced the invisible lattice connecting them. Calvin knew instinctively that the coming days would demand even greater skill, subtlety, and vigilance. The strands of influence were taut, the game was intricate, and the delicate interplay of power, trust, and observation was far from reaching its conclusion. The following morning carried an uncharacteristic heaviness, as though the city itself had been weighed down by unseen forces. Calvin awoke with a heightened sense of anticipation, the memory of previous encounters with Marcy resonating through his thoughts like the echo of a finely tuned instrument. The web he had woven was intricate, the threads taut with influence and subtle trust, yet the persistent awareness of potential disruption, the shadowed observer, the unpredictable currents of the city, kept him alert and precise in all his actions. His morning routine was executed with the habitual precision that had become second nature. Each motion, from the careful arrangement of clothing to the methodical brewing of coffee, was a rehearsal in control. The mirror reflected a man fully conscious of his intentions and of the fragility of the strands he had spun. Every day presented opportunity and risk alike, and Calvin navigated the delicate balance with the measured patience of a strategist preparing for an unseen contest. Marcy had mentioned a lecture at a small, independent library that afternoon, a gathering intended for discussion of narrative techniques and artistic expression. Calvin recognized immediately the potential for subtle influence, a structured yet intimate setting where he could observe her interactions under social pressure, reinforce trust, and extend his guidance while maintaining the appearance of casual companionship. He arrived early, selecting a seat that offered both a comprehensive view of the room and a measure of privacy from potential observers. When Marcy arrived, Calvin noted the familiar micro-expressions, the tension in her posture, the way her eyes scanned the room before locking on his presence, the fleeting sigh of relief as their shared gaze met. Their smile, subtle and almost imperceptible, was a silent acknowledgement of rhythm, trust, and ongoing engagement. Calvin's greeting was warm and measured, subtly infusing reassurance while reinforcing his role as a stabilizing presence. Marcy's relaxation was immediate, a sign that the web of influence was tightening around her without her conscious awareness. The lecture commenced, and Calvin's attention was fully engaged. He observed Marcy's reactions to each speaker, cataloging the nuances of her expressions, gestures, and micro-reactions. His commentary, offered sparingly and with deliberate precision, guided her attention and perception while reinforcing confidence. Each word, each subtle nod, each small affirmation contributed to the invisible lattice of trust and influence he had been constructing over days. During a brief intermission, Calvin suggested they step outside for a short walk through a nearby courtyard. The air was heavy with the scent of damp stone and rain-soaked foliage, and the muted city sounds created an atmosphere of contemplative calm. Calvin's questions were carefully chosen, appearing casual yet designed to elicit reflection and subtle disclosure. Marcy responded, revealing thoughts and emotions she had previously guarded, each revelation adding another thread to the intricate web of influence. Calvin catalogued each detail with meticulous care, the cadence of her voice, the hesitation before certain admissions, the flicker of emotion in her eyes. Every nuance was a potential lever for shaping future interactions, reinforcing reliance, and guiding perception. The web was tightening, yet it remained invisible, a delicate lattice of trust, suggestion, and psychological orchestration. Marcy's apparent spontaneity masked the carefully managed structure of influence that Calvin maintained with unwavering attention. Returning to the lecture hall, Calvin remained alert, navigating the interactions between Marcy and other attendees with subtle finesse. He guided the discussion through gentle interventions, suggesting perspectives that reinforced her confidence, highlighted her insight, and positioned him as a quiet but authoritative presence. The careful orchestration of social dynamics, observation, and engagement allowed him to maintain both influence and discretion. A visiting speaker questioned a detail in Marcy's understanding, a minor challenge that could have unsettled her. Calvin interjected delicately, offering perspective and framing the critique in a manner that reinforced her competence without overtly contradicting authority. Marcy's posture softened, her expression relaxed, and Calvin noted the incremental strengthening of the trust and reliance he had cultivated. Each interaction, however subtle, was a reinforcement of the invisible web that connected them. After the lecture concluded, Calvin suggested a detour to a nearby alley that led to a small, secluded cafe, a place he had scouted for its privacy and controlled environment. The streets were wet from an afternoon drizzle, casting reflections of street lamps and neon signs across the cobblestones. Conversation continued easily, interspersed with reflective pauses and moments of gentle intimacy. Calvin observed, guided, and reinforced the web of influence, maintaining the appearance of casual companionship while ensuring the threads tightened ever so subtly. Yet even amid the apparent calm, Calvin's vigilance remained acute. Shadows shifted at the edges of his vision, the faint presence of the mysterious observer lingered like a phantom, and the unpredictable movements of the city added an underlying tension. Every gesture, word, and glance was a careful negotiation between engagement and awareness, trust and precaution. Calvin's composure, while outwardly relaxed, was a performance of control, masking the meticulous attention that dictated each step of his interaction with Marcy. As they approached Marcy's apartment, Calvin sensed movement in a nearby doorway, a shadow shifting in deliberate steps, observing but not approaching. His pulse quickened subtly, yet he maintained outward calm, ensuring that Marcy felt reassurance rather than apprehension. The figure was catalogued as a variable, another element in the complex matrix of vigilance and influence that governed his actions. Balance remained essential, too much tension, and trust could fracture, too little, and unseen threats might intervene. At her door, Marcy paused, glancing at him with a mixture of curiosity, gratitude, and reliance. "Today I think I understand more about myself," she said softly, her voice carrying both reflection and wonder. Calvin's faint smile was reassuring, reinforcing the bond he had nurtured while maintaining the appearance of casual interaction. "Self-discovery often comes in the company of someone who observes and listens with intention," he said gently, each word layered with subtle influence. "Guidance is rarely overt, it is woven through careful attention, reflection, and shared understanding." Marcy entered her apartment, closing the door behind her, leaving Calvin for a brief moment in the street, absorbing the interplay of shadows, light, and the muted rhythm of the city around him. Returning to his own apartment, Calvin stood by the window, cigarette in hand, watching the city below. The strands of influence he had meticulously woven around Marcy were taut, the web increasingly potent, yet the awareness of the observer, the shifting environment, and the unpredictable human element maintained a subtle tension. Control was provisional, delicate, and required constant vigilance. Every word, gesture, and interaction was part of a continuous negotiation of perception, trust, and influence. Night enveloped the city fully, draping streets, buildings, and alleyways in shadow and fog. Calvin exhaled slowly, savoring the satisfaction tempered by vigilance. The strands of influence were pulling Marcy closer, the web tightening with every carefully orchestrated interaction. Yet he knew instinctively that the coming days would demand even greater skill, subtlety, and foresight. The game, complex and fragile, was far from concluded, and the next moves promised both opportunity and danger. The thrill of engagement, the intoxicating blend of anticipation, control, and psychological maneuvering pulsed through him. Each conversation, each gesture, each carefully crafted suggestion reinforced the delicate lattice of connection. Calvin understood that mastery required patience, subtlety, and unwavering attention to both visible and unseen forces. The strands were taut, the game intricate, and the web of influence ready for the final stages of its design. The night settled over the city with an unusual stillness, the kind that carried a latent electricity, hinting at imminent change. Calvin awoke with a mixture of anticipation and calculation, the culmination of days of subtle maneuvering converging in his mind. The web around Marcy was now taut, an intricate lattice of influence, trust, and reliance, yet the awareness of the persistent observer lingered, an unseen presence that reminded him that control was never absolute. Every interaction, every word, every carefully orchestrated gesture had brought them to this delicate threshold, and the coming hours would test both patience and precision. Calvin's morning routine was performed with ritualistic exactitude. Each movement, each adjustment, each deliberate action served as preparation for the day's inevitable encounters. The mirror reflected a man poised, aware of both his strategy and the fragility inherent in the complex web he had created. Every day had been a step toward this point, a meticulous calibration of trust, subtle persuasion, and observation. Now, the threads were taut, ready to bear the weight of culmination, yet still susceptible to the slightest disturbance. Marcy had arranged to meet him for a final discussion of her recent works at a secluded gallery, a private space filled with shadowed corners, soft lighting, and the faint scent of oil paint. Calvin recognized immediately the potential, an environment intimate enough to foster reflection and openness, yet public enough to maintain a semblance of casual engagement. He arrived early, positioning himself strategically to observe not only Marcy's reactions but also the potential movements of any unseen observer whose presence had subtly shadowed their interactions. When Marcy arrived, Calvin noticed the familiar nuances, the subtle shift in her shoulders, the scanning of the gallery before her gaze settled on him, and the fleeting sigh of relief that came from connecting eyes with him. Their shared smile, a quiet acknowledgement of rhythm, trust, and ongoing engagement, reinforced the lattice of influence he had nurtured over days. Calvin's greeting was warm and precise, subtly infusing reassurance while establishing the foundation for the delicate culmination that awaited. The gallery visit unfolded with an almost hypnotic rhythm. Calvin guided Marcy's attention with measured commentary, prompting reflections on technique, expression, and emotional resonance. Each word was deliberate, each suggestion carefully weighted to reinforce trust, build confidence, and subtly direct her thought processes. Marcy responded naturally, unaware of the intricate lattice of psychological influence that framed every interaction. Each nuanced reaction, her slight nods, thoughtful pauses, fleeting glances, served as confirmation that the web was fully engaged and responsive. During a quiet interlude, Calvin suggested stepping onto the gallery's terrace, where the city sprawled below in a tapestry of lights, shadow, and movement. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain from earlier showers, and the scene offered a contemplative backdrop for intimate conversation. Calvin allowed silence to settle between them at strategic intervals, observing Marcy's body language, her gestures, and the flickers of emotion that passed across her face. Every pause was a tool, every glance a cue, every movement a potential lever in the subtle orchestration of influence. Marcy spoke with unguarded candor, reflecting on her work, her ambitions, and the anxieties that had previously constrained her expression. Calvin listened with deliberate attentiveness, offering affirmations, framing perspectives, and subtly positioning himself as a reliable, stabilizing presence. The threads of influence tightened further, interweaving with trust, curiosity, and the faint but undeniable sense of reliance that Marcy now displayed. Each disclosure, each revelation, became a node in the intricate web, binding them closer while preserving the illusion of spontaneity. The afternoon shadows deepened, and Calvin's vigilance remained unwavering. The faint presence of the observer lingered in his peripheral awareness, a silent reminder that unseen eyes might yet intrude. Shadows shifted across the terrace, the rhythm of the city below maintained its muted cadence, and the delicate balance between engagement, influence, and precaution required constant calibration. Calvin's composure, though outwardly serene, concealed a meticulous accounting of variables, contingencies, and potential disruptions. As the evening approached, Calvin suggested a short stroll through the garden adjoining the gallery, a secluded area where ambient light from street lamps cast intricate patterns across paths and foliage. The garden offered both intimacy and control, allowing for continued conversation and subtle psychological maneuvering. Calvin guided discussion with gentle questions and reflective prompts, encouraging Marcy to articulate thoughts and emotions that had remained largely unspoken. Each articulation reinforced the strands of trust and influence, deepening her reliance on his insight while maintaining the appearance of natural interaction. A sudden rustle of leaves nearby made Calvin's pulse quicken, yet he maintained composure, masking awareness of the movement with a casual glance. The shadowed observer, the ever-present unknown, was an element he had learned to accommodate, integrating it seamlessly into his awareness without allowing it to disrupt the carefully choreographed interactions. Every gesture, every word, every subtle hint of reassurance was part of a balance between guidance and caution, influence and observation. As they neared the edge of the garden, Calvin allowed a moment of silence to linger, creating space for reflection, emotional resonance, and subtle reinforcement of trust. Marcy's posture softened, her gestures became more fluid, and the tension that had characterized previous encounters eased into a rhythm of measured intimacy. The web was now fully engaged, the strands taut, and Calvin's orchestration had reached its zenith. Yet vigilance remained essential, the potential for disruption persisted in every shadow, every passing figure, every unobserved movement. Finally, at Marcy's apartment door, Calvin observed her hesitation, the slight lift of eyebrows, the reflective pause before she spoke. I feel like I've discovered something profound about myself today, she said softly, her voice carrying both wonder and a trace of reliance. Calvin's faint smile conveyed reassurance, subtly reinforcing the delicate lattice of trust without overt declaration. Self-discovery, he said, his voice calm and measured, often occurs not in isolation but in the presence of someone who listens, observes, and guides without imposing. Reflection, shared carefully, can reveal layers we never knew existed. Each word carried nuance, reinforcing her reliance while preserving the perception of autonomy and choice. Marcy entered her apartment, closing the door behind her, leaving Calvin for a moment on the street, absorbing the interplay of shadows, light, and the subdued rhythm of the city that had framed their interactions. Returning to his own apartment, Calvin stood by the window, cigarette in hand, observing the city below. The web he had spun was taut, intricate, and potent, the strands of trust, influence, and psychological engagement fully interwoven. Yet the ever-present awareness of the observer, the subtle movements of the urban landscape, and the unpredictability of human response maintained a faint but persistent tension. Control was delicate, provisional, and required constant vigilance even at the apparent conclusion of the game. Night descended fully, enveloping streets, buildings, and alleyways in fog and muted light. Calvin exhaled slowly, savoring a measured satisfaction tempered by awareness. The strands were taut, Marcy's reliance and trust fully engaged, and the intricate lattice of influence had reached its culmination. The careful orchestration of days, the deliberate cultivation of interactions, and the nuanced reinforcement of trust had achieved its intended outcome. Yet Calvin understood instinctively that even a completed web was subject to the unpredictable forces of life. Influence, like light through glass, could fracture under unseen pressure, and vigilance must never wane. The thrill of engagement, the intoxicating blend of anticipation, control, and strategic foresight, lingered even as the game reached its designed conclusion. Every subtle maneuver, every calibrated gesture, Every conversation and reflection had drawn Marcy deeper into the lattice of influence he had meticulously constructed. As he watched the city breathe beneath him, Calvin allowed a quiet, private acknowledgement of satisfaction. The web was complete, the strands taut, and the game had reached its endpoint. Yet the shadows remained, the observer lingered at the periphery of awareness, and the potential for future movement and change existed even within the seemingly controlled lattice. The city, the people, the interactions, all remained variables in the ongoing, infinite calculus of influence, perception, and trust. The night, heavy with the stillness of culmination, carried an almost imperceptible sense of suspense. Calvin, standing by the window, recognized both the power he had wielded and the delicate responsibility it entailed. Each strand of trust, each moment of reliance, each subtle psychological maneuver had been carefully orchestrated to achieve this moment, yet he remained aware that equilibrium in human interaction is always provisional. And so the city slept beneath him, the streets muted, the shadows deep, and Calvin exhaled one final plume of smoke into the cool night air, a quiet acknowledgement of mastery achieved, vigilance maintained, and the delicate, intricate dance of influence that had carried him to the edge of resolution. The game, fragile and intricate, had reached its designed conclusion, yet the rhythm of life and the unpredictable nature of human behavior ensured that the strands would continue to resonate, echoing through the subtle fabric of perception, trust, and unspoken connection.